I was in emergency surgery after a workplace accident. My boss texted, "Don't bother returning. You're terminated. Clear out your desk. Find another job." I replied with 3 words, "See you soon." Then I made one call to my employment lawyer. 48 hours later, 23 missed calls. HR director panicking. Welcome to Cheat Sheet Tales, where loyalty dies, lies bleed out, and the truth hits like a slap to the face. These aren't just stories. They're confessions soaked in betrayal and regret. Ever spotted a red flag when it was already too late? Say it in the comments. Hit the subscribe button, and then let's tear into today's tale. The monitor's beeping slowed as I blinked away. Anesthesia fog, white ceiling, antiseptic smell, pain, throbbing beneath layers of medication. And can you hear me? A blue-masked face hovered above. The surgery went as well as could be expected. The crush injury was severe, but we've managed to save your leg. I tried to nod, but my neck muscles refused to cooperate. You'll need extensive rehabilitation. I won't sugarcoat this. Recovery will be challenging, but with consistent therapy, you should regain most function. The words echoed as I glanced down at the bulky bandages where my right leg disappeared. Beneath sheets, 8 hours earlier, I'd been conducting a routine safety inspection when the improperly secured scaffold collapsed. The same scaffold I'd flagged 3 times in written reports. My phone buzzed on the side table. The nurse hesitated, then handed it to me. When I stretched my fingers toward it, through medication haze, I squinted at the screen. The message was from Heath, my boss of 8 years. "Don't bother returning. You're terminated. Clear out your desk. Find another job." The room tilted sideways. 8 years supervising safety operations at Westward Construction. 8 years of overtime, missed weekends, navigating dangerous sites to keep workers safe. Ended with 11 cold words while medical drains still collected fluid from my crushed leg. My fingers trembled as I typed 3 words in response. "See you soon." I dropped the phone and let darkness pull me under again. When I woke hours later, 27 missed calls lit my screen. Coworkers expressing shock, asking questions I couldn't answer, but nothing from Heath. The physical therapist appeared the next morning, all false cheer and practiced optimism, ready to start the journey back to walking. I smiled thinly, more than ready. What Heath couldn't know was that my termination had solved an impossible dilemma I'd been wrestling with for months. During routine inspections, I discovered our company was installing counterfeit structural supports in 3 major buildings, including the new elementary school. These knockoffs looked identical to certified materials, but would buckle under Dreamworld stress. My attempts to report this through proper channels had mysteriously disappeared each time. As the therapist guided me through simple movements that sent lightning bolts of pain through my damaged nerves, I made my decision. From my hospital bed, I made one call to an employment lawyer with a background in construction safety regulations. "This termination while you're hospitalized from a work site injury is textbook retaliation," she said after hearing my story. "But these counterfeit materials, that puts lives at risk, especially children's lives." As she spoke, I watched the medical team change my bandages, revealing the angry red path of stitches running from knee to ankle. "I need to warn you," the lawyer continued. "This path might cost you everything professionally. Construction is a small world. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Heath's message. The elementary school set to open in September. 200 children. "I'm already paying the price," I answered. "Let's make it worth something." If you've ever felt that moment when injustice crystallizes into pure resolve, please hit like. If you want to know how this unfolds, what happened after I pressed send on those 3 little words, "See you soon," subscribe now, because what happened next changed more than just my life. My name is Claire Reeves. Before all this, I was known for 3 things: my meticulous safety reports, my inability to ignore potential hazards, and my legendary patience. That last quality died the day Heath fired me. I grew up with a construction worker father who came home each night with stories, some funny, some terrifying. When he didn't come home one night because of an improperly secured beam, I promised his memory I'd Make work sites safer. By 30, I'd earned my safety certification and landed at Westward Construction, where I eventually supervised all safety operations across multiple projects. Heath Mercer had been supportive initially. Safety first was his catchphrase during client meetings. But priorities shifted when the company landed 3 prestigious contracts simultaneously: an elementary school, a hospital wing, and a government building. Suddenly, every inspection that slowed progress became a problem. Every safety concern became excessive caution. We need to be efficient. And became his new mantra. Everyone's counting on these timelines. I tried to be a team player while holding the line on critical issues. But 3 months ago, during a routine materials inspection, I noticed something odd about the structural supports being installed in the elementary school gymnasium. The certification stamps looked slightly off, the spacing between letters inconsistent, the impression too shallow. I quietly pulled the specifications and made calls to the supposed manufacturer. Their records showed no delivery to our site. The materials were counterfeit, convincing replicas that would pass visual inspection, but lacked the load-bearing capacity of genuine supports. That night, I drafted a comprehensive report and sent it directly to Heath. By morning, it had vanished from the system. When I mentioned it, he looked at me with narrowed eyes. I never received any report. Are you sure you sent it? I tried again, documenting everything meticulously. Again, the report disappeared. When I discovered the same counterfeit materials at the hospital construction site, I knew this wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. 2 weeks before my accident, I began gathering evidence quietly. Photographs, material samples, supplier, communications. I created duplicate records off the company servers. I was torn between exposing dangerous practices and protecting coworkers whose families depended on these jobs. The scaffold inspection that ended with my leg crushed under twisted metal was one Heath had insisted I conduct personally, despite my written concerns about its stability. If you're so worried about safety, Heath said with a tight smile, you should verify it yourself. Now, lying in the hospital bed as the lawyer outlined our strategy, I realized Heath had never expected me to find definitive proof of the counterfeit materials. And once I had, he created a situation where I'd either back down or be removed. He just hadn't planned on removing me in a way that freed me completely from any remaining loyalty. For 48 hours, my lawyer worked methodically, submitting my detailed records to building inspectors and safety regulators. Meanwhile, Westward remained oblivious until inspectors arrived unannounced at the school construction site. On the 3rd day, as a physical therapist helped me attempt my first painful stand on crutches, my phone began lighting up with bewildered messages from coworkers, describing government vehicles at our offices. News alerts mentioned urgent safety inspections at our building sites. And missed calls accumulated 23 from Brooke, the HR director alone. When I finally answered, panic strained her voice. Audi, please. We need to talk. This misunderstanding has gone too far. We can't afford the liability lawsuit you're bringing. Inspectors have halted all our projects. The board is in emergency meetings. This was never about money, I replied calmly. 200 children would have attended that school next fall. What happens when those support beams fail during a winter storm? The executive team is willing to make significant changes, she pleaded. I watched a nurse adjust my foredrip. Here's what happens next. Complete replacement of every counterfeit component, supervised by independent inspectors. A public statement acknowledging the substitutions. And Heath faces the regulatory board for knowingly endangering public safety. You're asking for the impossible. Heath is responsible. I finished for her, just like I would have been if I'd stayed silent. I hung up as the physical therapist returned. Ready to try again, she asked. Each attempt to put weight on my damaged leg sent white-hot pain shooting up to my hip. Sweat bested on my forehead as I fought to remain upright. Think of it as rebuilding, she encouraged. Your body is learning a new way forward. So was I. That night, local news ran a brief segment about safety concerns, halting construction at 3 major Westward projects. The company's statement called it routine compliance verification. My heart sank. Were they going to escape with minor fines, a slap on the wrist? All my evidence, my sacrifice reduced to a temporary inconvenience for Heath? I stared at my leg, wondering if justice would be as crippled as I felt. Then came the turning point. An inspector discovered the same counterfeit supports had been used in the hospital's new cancer treatment wing. Suddenly, regulators swarmed every project Westward had completed in 5 years. My phone rang at midnight. Heath's name flashed on the screen. "You vindictive witch," he hissed when I answered. "Do you have any idea what you've done? We're talking about hundreds of jobs, millions in contracts." "I know exactly what I've done," I replied. "I've stopped buildings from collapsing on innocent people. These materials passed every visual inspection. The risk was minimal." "Minimal?" My voice rose. "Like the minimal risk of that scaffold you ordered me to inspect personally after I reported it was unstable." Silence stretched between us. "That was an unfortunate accident," he finally said, voice carefully controlled. "Was it?" I asked softly, because from my hospital bed with surgical drains still in my leg, it looks a lot like you needed me gone. Before I found more evidence. "You can't prove that." "Maybe not, but I've proven enough to bring inspectors to every site where you cut corners." "Where does the chain of paperwork lead, Heath? Who approved the counterfeit materials? Who profited from the substitutions?" He hung up. The next morning, Brooke appeared in my hospital room, handbag clutched tight against her chest. "The board wants to settle," she said without preamble. "Name your price." I adjusted myself painfully in the bed. "I already told you my terms. Heath is a major shareholder. The board can't simply remove him. Then the inspections continue and I cooperate fully with every investigation." Brooke's professional composure cracked. "Please, Audie, I'm begging you. There are 400 families depending on Westward's survival." I thought about my father, about promises made at his funeral, about the elementary school and hospital patients, who would never know how close they came to disaster. "I don't want Westward destroyed," I said quietly. "I want it fixed." She looked up, hope flickering across her face. "If the board agrees to independent safety monitoring for 5 years, replacement of all identified counterfeit materials, and Heath's removal from operational decisions, I'll limit my personal claim to medical expenses and 2 years' salary. And Heath, that's between him and the regulatory board." After she left, I tried standing again with the therapist's help. This time I managed 3 steps before the pain forced me back to the bed. "Progress," the therapist noted, writing in my chart. That afternoon, news broke that Westward's projects remained suspended pending comprehensive material verification. Financial analysts predicted the company might not survive the scandal. The elementary schools opening would be delayed at least a year. My lawyer called with updates. The regulators found evidence of systematic substitution going back 3 years. They're moving from safety violations to potential criminal fraud charges against Westward or individuals. They're still determining that. But I received a settlement offer from the company that meets your terms with one addition. They want a confidentiality agreement. I thought about all those who might face similar situations in the future. About safety inspectors pressured to overlook violations. About workers afraid to report dangers. "No confidentiality clause," I replied. "I need to be able to speak about what happened that evening." While attempting my exercises, a text arrived from Kit, my closest coworker. "Emergency board meeting happening now. Rumors of major restructuring. Heath locked in with lawyers all day. What's really going on?" I hadn't told anyone at Westward about my discoveries. Now I wondered how many might have suspected but stayed silent. How many might have known? As I considered my response, breaking news alerts appeared on my phone. Construction giant faces potential criminal charges in counterfeit materials scandal. The company's stock plummeted. Project clients began publicly reviewing their options. The mayor announced an emergency inspection of all recently constructed public buildings. My phone lit up with Heath's name again. Against better judgment, I answered. "You could have come to me privately," he said, voice tight with controlled fury. Instead, you've destroyed everything we built. I did come to you twice. My reports disappeared. Those reports were alarmist. We had assurances from the supplier. Stop lying, Heath. The supplier didn't exist. It was a shell created to import these knockoffs. I found the paper trail. His silence confirmed what I'd suspected. How long have you known? I asked, unable to hide the tremor in my voice. This conversation is over. My attorney advises against further contact. The line went dead. I set down my phone, staring at the hospital ceiling as darkness gathered outside my window. 8 years of my career spent believing I was protecting people, only to discover I'd been used as window dressing for a company, cutting corners in ways that could have killed hundreds. 3 days later, the physical therapist helped me into a wheelchair. You've graduated from bed rest. Consider this progress. Progress felt like a mockery when my formerly athletic body now struggled with basic movement. Each therapy session left me drenched in sweat, teeth clenched against waves of pain. Nights brought restless sleep, interrupted by throbbing aches and memories of metal collapsing around me. Meanwhile, the investigation expanded. Building inspectors discovered counterfeit materials in 7 more westward projects. The board announced Heath's temporary leave of absence pending internal review. Reporters camped outside company headquarters, thrust microphones at employees entering and leaving. Brooke called twice daily with increasingly desperate settlement offers. The company's on the brink, Claire. 400 jobs hanging by a thread. The materials must be replaced. I repeated each time. No shortcuts. That's a $30 million undertaking. Cheaper than funerals. What the public didn't yet know, what my lawyer was carefully documenting, was that the counterfeit materials scheme had generated enormous profits. Somewhere, money that should have purchased proper structural supports sat in accounts while children would have played beneath disaster. Waiting to happen. 6 days after surgery, Kit sneaked into my hospital room, glancing nervously over her shoulder. I'm not supposed to be here, she whispered, setting down a small plant. HR sent a memo forbidding contact with you. How thoughtful of them, I said, shifting painfully to sit up straighter. How are things inside? Kit's face tightened. Chaos. Inspectors everywhere. They've seized computers, files. People are jumping ship daily. And Heath gone. Underground. Rumor says he flew to his lake house. But here's what's weird. She leaned closer. The night before your accident, I saw him removing boxes from his office. After hours, when he thought everyone had left, a chill spread through me. He knew. Knew what? I hesitated. How much could I safely tell her? That something was coming, I said. Carefully. Kit, did you ever notice anything odd about the structural supports at the elementary school? Her eyes widened slightly before she looked away. I'm not a materials inspection, but you saw something. Her hands twisted. In her lap. Maybe some discrepancies in the shipping manifests. Numbers that didn't match orders. I mentioned it to Heath once. He said accounting would handle it. And you left it there. Shame colored her face. I have twins in college, Claire. This job pays their tuition. I didn't judge her. How many others had noticed problems and stayed silent for similar reasons? How close had I come to doing the same? You should go, I told her. Being seen with me won't help you. As she left, she paused at the door. For what it's worth, most of us respect what you're doing. We're just scared. That night, I attempted to stand. Without assistance, gripping the hospital bed rail. My damaged leg trembled violently, barely supporting a fraction of my weight. 1 step, burning pain. Another step, sweat bested on my forehead. 3 steps before collapsing back onto the bed. My breath coming in harsh gasps. Not enough. Not nearly enough. My phone chimed with a news alert. Construction safety director raises questions about inspection procedures. The article quoted an anonymous Westward executive claiming I had personally approved the questioned materials. They were setting me up as the scapegoat. I called my lawyer. Immediately. They're trying to pin this on me. Expected move, she replied calmly. But ineffective. You're Documentation shows you flagged these issues repeatedly. Their digital cleanup wasn't as thorough as they thought. What do you mean? The IT specialist I hired recovered fragments of your deleted reports from the company server. Backups. Enough to establish you raised concerns. Enough to prove someone intentionally removed them. Relief washed through me, followed quickly by renewed determination. What's our next move? Tomorrow, the regulatory board convenes its preliminary hearing. Westward will present their explanation for the materials discrepancies. Want to attend? Will Heath be there? His attorneys filed notice he'll appear via video link, citing security concerns. Of course, he wouldn't face me in person. I'll be there. The next morning required extraordinary effort. Any ice, hospital, discharge paperwork, awkward maneuvering into suitable clothes that would fit over my bandages, painful navigation on crutches to my lawyer's waiting car. Every movement sent shocks of pain through my leg, but I refused additional medication. I needed clarity today. The regulatory board had commandeered a downtown conference room. As I hobbled in on crutches, conversations hushed momentarily before resuming at lower volumes. Reporters scribbled notes. Regulatory officials shuffled papers. At the front table sat 5 Westward representatives, including Brooke, who pointedly avoided eye contact. A large screen displayed Heath's face, his lake house visible in the background. His expression remained neutral when he saw me, but his left eye twitched slightly, the same tell I'd noticed whenever he lied during performance reviews. The board chairman called the hearing to order. This preliminary inquiry concerns alleged safety violations and potential fraudulent materials substitution at multiple construction sites managed by Westward Construction. For 2 hours, company attorneys presented a carefully constructed narrative, isolated incidents, supplier verification, failures, procedural oversights, never fraud, never intentional. Heath spoke, briefly, expressing profound concern and commitment to complete transparency and remedy. Finally, the chairman turned to me. Ms. Reeves, as former safety operations supervisor, would you care to address the board? My lawyer helped me stand. The pain in my leg intensified as I put weight on my crutches, but I focused on Heath's face on the screen. 3 months ago, I discovered counterfeit structural supports being installed in an elementary school gymnasium. I documented my findings and reported them through proper channels twice. Both reports vanished from our systems. 2 weeks ago, I was conducting an inspection that my superior I nodded toward Heath's image, specifically instructed me to perform personally. Despite my written safety concerns about the scaffold, that scaffold collapsed, resulting in injuries requiring surgical intervention. I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the board members. While I was in surgery, Mr. Mercer terminated my employment via text message. That termination freed me to share what I had discovered, that Westward has systematically replaced certified structural supports with counterfeit materials in at least 10 projects over the past 3 years. Heath's attorney interrupted. These are unsubstantiated allegations from a disgruntled former employee seeking financial gain. I have substantiation, I replied steadily. Complete documentation of the original reports, material samples, photographic evidence, and shipping records showing the counterfeit supply chain. Additionally, recovered server data showing my reports were deliberately deleted from company systems. The room erupted in murmurs. Heath's face on the screen had gone rigid. The chairman raised his hand for silence. These are serious allegations, requiring thorough investigation. This hearing will recess while the board reviews the provided materials. As officials filed out, reporters surged forward with questions. My lawyer shielded me, guiding me toward a side door. Through the crowd, I caught Brooke's eye. Her expression wasn't anger as I expected, but something closer to resignation. In the hallway, away from cameras, she approached cautiously. The board didn't know, Audi, about your reports being deleted, about Heath ordering you onto that scaffold, but they suspected something wasn't right with the materials. She didn't deny it. Cost-cutting pressures have been intense. Since the pandemic, the contracts were bid too low to begin with. That doesn't justify endangering lives. No, she agreed quietly. It doesn't. My phone buzzed with a text from Kit. Executives. In emergency meeting. Shredders running overtime in accounting. I showed it to my lawyer, who immediately placed calls to the regulatory board and district attorney's office. Within an hour, news broke that authorities had obtained an emergency order to secure all Westward financial records. Heath's video feed too. The hearing mysteriously disconnected. When authorities arrived at his lake house, he was gone. For the next 2 weeks, I focused on physical therapy while the investigation unfolded in headlines. Construction exec, missing as fraud investigation deepens. Counterfeit. Building materials traced to overseas supplier. Westward Construction faces class action from project clients. Criminal charges expected in building materials fraud case. Through it all, Heath remained missing. His passport hadn't been used. His known accounts showed no recent activity. Speculation ran wild. He'd fled with falsified documents, was hiding with accomplices, had ended his life rather than face charges. 23 days after my surgery, I managed to walk 10 steps unassisted. The physical therapist beamed. Remarkable progress. That same day, regulators announced Westward would operate under court-appointed oversight while replacing all counterfeit materials. The company would survive, but with new leadership and stringent monitoring, 400 jobs preserved, though the financial penalties would be substantial. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, restlessness gnawed at me. Heath had vanished, potentially escaping accountability entirely. The person most responsible might never face consequences while workers and clients suffered the fallout. That evening, my doorbell rang. I moved painfully to answer it, expecting the food delivery I'd ordered. Instead, Brooke stood there, clutching a manila envelope. "May I come in?" she asked, eyes darting nervously behind her. I hesitated, then stepped aside. She entered, declining to sit when offered. "The board finalized your settlement agreement today," she said, extending the envelope. "Everything you asked for, plus additional compensation for your injuries." I set it aside, unopened. Had they heard from Heath? No. His attorneys claimed no knowledge of his whereabouts. She shifted uncomfortably. "That's not why I'm here." Then why? She pulled a thumb drive from her pocket. "During the records review, I found something. Financial. Transfers to an account in Vice. Regular payments coinciding with materials deliveries. Coded as consultant fees, but with no corresponding contractor. Heath's kickbacks from the counterfeit supplier. Yes, but he wasn't the only one receiving payments." She handed me the drive. 3 board members were involved. They've quietly resigned, but there won't be charges. The company can't withstand more scandal. Why give this to me? Her professional composure cracked because 20 years ago I was an architect. I designed a small apartment building that collapsed during construction. 3 workers died. The investigation cleared me blamed contractor negligence. But I've always wondered if I missed something in my designs. I joined Westward to ensure projects were built safely. Tears welled in her eyes. I failed. I suspected problems but convinced myself Heath was handling them. People could have died because I didn't look harder. I studied her, seeing genuine remorse. "What do you expect me to do with this?" "Whatever you think is right." She moved toward the door. "The settlement is unconditional. The information is yours regardless." After she left, I stared at the thumb drive for hours. More revelations would devastate Westward entirely. 400 jobs, families, communities, but accountability mattered too. My phone rang. My lawyer with news. "They've located Heath. Border Patrol detained him trying to cross into Canada with altered identification. He's being returned to face charges." A weight lifted from my chest. Will the charges stick? The evidence is overwhelming. Multiple felony counts of fraud, endangerment, falsification of safety records. He's looking at substantial prison time. I glanced at the thumb drive. What about his accomplices? The investigation continues. Why? I thought about Brooke's tear-filled confession, about Kit's fear for her children's education. About 400 families. No. Reason, I said, just being thorough. 3 months after my injury, I watched the evening news from my physical therapy session. Heath appeared on screen in handcuffs, being led into court for his arraignment. The company president had resigned in disgrace. Westward continued under new leadership and strict oversight, the replacement of counterfeit materials proceeding under independent verification. My settlement established a whistleblower fund for construction workers who report safety violations. The therapist observed my walking progress. You'll always have a slight limp. The nerve damage was too extensive for complete recovery. I nodded, taking another careful step. The pain remained duller now, but constant. With each step, I remembered that sometimes getting broken is necessary to prevent others from being broken, too. What I didn't tell the therapist, as what I hadn't told anyone, was that the limp served as my daily reminder of unfinished business. Heath would face justice through the courts, but the board members who enabled him, who profited alongside him while endangering countless lives, remained protected by corporate shields and legal maneuvers. Brooks' thumb drive sat in my desk drawer, its contents backed up in multiple secure locations. The day would come to decide what to do with that information. For now, I focused on healing, on each painful step forward. The final chapter of this story hadn't yet been written. Because while Heath believed he'd silenced me with that text message, he'd actually set something far more dangerous in motion. He'd given me nothing left to lose. Watching Heath's prep walk on television, I smiled for the first time in months. Not because I enjoyed his downfall, but because justice had finally begun its slow, grinding work. The news anchor's voice filled the therapy room. Former construction executive Heath Mercer faces up to 30 years in prison if convicted on all counts. Meanwhile, building inspectors continue examining all structures completed under his supervision. Is that the man responsible for your injury? The therapist asked. Part of the responsibility, I replied, taking another careful step forward. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The board thinks they're safe. Are they? I didn't respond. Not yet. My revenge wasn't about quick satisfaction or public humiliation. It would be served methodically, thoroughly, and with the same careful attention to detail I'd once brought to safety inspections. Because some dangers aren't visible until the entire structure comes crashing down. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button. If you've ever stood up against wrongdoing despite the personal cost, share your experience in the comments. Subscribe to hear more stories about justice that comes not in dramatic moments, but through quiet, unwavering persistence. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't what we do to others. It's refusing to let them change who we are.